From medical goddess to millionaire's burden, love or exploitation. The sensational, cruel headline was a sharp scalpel, tearing apart the facade of happiness Emily Parker was trying so hard to build. She sat stunned on the luxurious leather sofa, once a symbol of her new life, now a gilded cage trapping her. The crumpled tabloid in her hands, each crease a fresh scar on her soul. Her proud title, medical goddess, was now twisted into a ridiculous joke. Most painfully, her son, Noah, was exposed like an item on display for the world to scrutinize and judge. The scent of cheap ink and newsprint stung her nostrils, just like the smell of betrayal. The opulence of the apartment suddenly felt suffocating. Every expensive item seemed to mock her, a constant reminder of the steep price she paid for this fragile piece. Everything was falling apart, and it all began on one rainy night. The hospital waiting room at night was longer and colder than any night before. Time felt thick, moving slowly and heavily. Each tick of the clock on the wall above was a hammer blow to Emily's constricted chest. She sat on a rigid plastic bench, her hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed on the closed emergency room door. Behind that door was her whole world, her little Noah, fighting a fever and struggling to breathe. Helplessness gnawed at her. She had done everything she could, and now all she could do was wait. Ethan had arranged for Lily to rest in a private clinic nearby, but he didn't leave. Something intangible held him back. He saw a reflection of himself in the young woman's worry, that same feeling of powerlessness when a loved one's fate lay in the hands of destiny and doctors. He returned to the waiting room, holding not one, but two steaming paper cups. He walked over, his presence startling Emily from her endless thoughts. He offered her one of the cups. "Ginger tea," he said, his voice warm and low. "It will help you warm up." Then he placed the other cup and a small thermos on the seat beside her. "This is coffee for me. The thermos is warm water, about 70 degrees. I noticed your baby formula needs this temperature. The little one might need it later." The thoughtfulness of this small gesture stunned Emily. This man wasn't just giving money, he was truly observing, truly caring. He didn't ask questions or pry, he simply and quietly did what was needed. She mumbled a thank you, her hands trembling as she took the tea. The warmth from the cup spread through her palms, seeping into a body that was numb with cold and fear. A while later, after the doctor had checked her and she had taken her medicine, Lily insisted on coming back to her father. She no longer looked tired, but instead had a childlike curiosity. She climbed onto the chair next to Emily, her small feet in pink ballet flats swinging gently in the air. She was silent for a long time, looking at Emily, then staring into the empty space. "Miss," she suddenly said in an innocent voice, "your hands are cold, just like my mommy's used to be." The words were an invisible needle, piercing the hearts of both adults. Ethan, who was taking a sip of coffee, froze. He turned away, looking out the window where raindrops were still drawing long streaks on the glass, as if he was trying to find something in the darkness. Emily lowered her head, and the tears she had held back since she arrived finally fell silently, dripping onto her worn jeans. A child's innocent words had touched two wounds at once: the pain of a husband's loss and the pain of a mother's abandonment. Just then, an elderly doctor with a head of silver hair and tortoise-shell glasses emerged from the administrative area. He stopped when he recognized Ethan. "Mr. Walker, I never expected to see you here." "Hello, Dr. Alvarez," Ethan replied awkwardly. He stood up, trying to maintain his composure. Dr. Alvarez looked at Emily, then back at Ethan with a knowing gaze. He used to be the head of the department where Sarah worked. He knew their story. He walked over, placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, and patted it gently. "This young boy is lucky to have you," he said, his voice warm and full of sympathy. "Just as many patients were lucky to have Sarah. She was the kindest doctor I've ever known. This hospital owes her a great debt. Tonight, I'm sure she is very proud of you in heaven." Emily heard every word. The doctor's words were a powerful confirmation. This man, Ethan Walker, was not acting on a whim. His kindness had a source, a depth, a legacy inherited from the wife he so deeply loved. She began to see not just temporary pity in him, but genuine empathy. A few hours later, the emergency room door finally opened. A nurse walked out, smiling. "The boy is out of danger. His fever has broken. We're moving him up to the pediatric ward for further observation." Emily sighed in relief, her whole body going limp. She staggered to her feet, feeling as though she had just shed a 1,000-pound burden. After Noah had been moved to the ward and placed in a clean, warm crib, Ethan spoke. "You need to rest, and the little one needs a quieter place to recover after he's discharged," he said, his voice firm. "I have a serviced apartment not far from here. I want you and the boy to stay there for a few days, until you are both truly stable." Emily hesitated, her pride and self-respect flaring up. She already owed this man so much. I have nothing to repay you with. I can't accept any more of your kindness. I'll find a way." Ethan cut her off, his eyes now truly sincere, without a trace of distance. He looked at her, then at Lily, who was dozing on his shoulder. "You don't owe me anything," he said, his voice softer. "I owe my daughter a lesson in kindness, and you helped her practice it. Consider this my way of repaying my daughter's kindness." He said that, but in his heart, he knew there was another reason. He couldn't just let them vanish back into the cold, rainy night. Sarah's legacy wouldn't allow him to. And perhaps a part of his lonely heart didn't want it either. The serviced apartment was cozy and bright, flooded with morning sunlight. It was a world in complete contrast to the damp street corners and dingy motels Emily and Noah had endured. For the first few days, the luxury made her feel out of place and uneasy. She moved softly, almost afraid to touch anything, worried she would tarnish its perfection. She and Noah were just transient guests, strangers who had been shown charity, and she constantly reminded herself of that. Everything changed when Ethan and Lily came to visit. They didn't arrive like arrogant benefactors. They came like awkward friends, carrying a bag of fast food and a new crib still in its box. And then, a hilarious scene unfolded. Ethan Walker, the powerful CEO who could decide the fate of thousands of employees with a single signature, was completely helpless in the face of a baby crib. He fumbled with the screws and wooden bars, his forehead beaded with sweat, the instruction manual crumpled in his hand. He assembled it incorrectly, took it apart, and then assembled it wrong again. "Dad, that bar has to go the other way," Lily said, her hands on her hips in a grown-up stance, her mouth still covered in French fry crumbs. Emily laughed, a genuine, clear, and unforced laugh. For the first time in months, she laughed so freely. "Let me see," she said, taking the manual. She read it carefully, then showed him each step. "This joint has to go in here first, you see?" The three of them, a wealthy man, a homeless woman, and a 6-year-old child, fumbled together on the floor. The sound of metal clanking, Emily's instructions, Lily's cheerful cheers, and Ethan's grumbling when he dropped a screw. Their laughter made the once unfamiliar room feel strangely alive and warm. When the crib was finally assembled, they looked at their handiwork, and for a moment they looked like a real family, preparing to welcome a new member. In the following days, Ethan and Lily visited more often. Emily, with the sensitivity of someone who once dreamed of being a doctor, gradually realized that behind his successful and somewhat distant exterior, Ethan was a lonely and somewhat mechanical father. He loved Lily, there was no doubt about that, but that love was expressed through expensive gifts and schedules arranged by a nanny. He didn't know how to play with his daughter or talk to her. He would ask about her homework and health, but rarely about her dreams or childish sorrows. One evening, seeing Lily watching TV alone while her father was busy answering work emails on his laptop, Emily gently suggested, "How about we read a story to Lily tonight? She seems to like that book, Sleeping Beauty." Ethan looked up, a little surprised. It had been so long since he had done that. Sarah used to. That night, for the first time in 2 years, Lily had both her father and a new friend reading her favorite story. She didn't sit aloof as usual, but snuggled against her father, her hand still holding Emily's. She fell asleep in that peaceful moment, a smile on her face. Ethan looked at his daughter, then at Emily, a warmth he had long forgotten seeping into his heart. He realized that his wealth could buy anything except these simple moments. Emily brought not only warmth but also life. She taught Ethan how to soothe a crying Noah with silly lullabies and how to make formula at the right temperature. In return, Ethan brought back old medical books he found in his library, books that Sarah used to read. He didn't say anything, just quietly placed them on the table. It was his way of showing respect for her dreams. Another night, after the two children were fast asleep, Emily went to the living room for a drink and found Ethan sitting alone in the dark. The faint light from his laptop screen illuminated his face, revealing a weariness and pain he couldn't hide. He was rewatching old videos of Sarah, clips of their last vacation, Sarah's laughter clear and full of happiness. She didn't disturb him. She just quietly went to the kitchen, brewed a cup of chamomile tea, and placed it on the table right beside his hand. That small, silent gesture broke down the defensive wall Ethan had worked so hard to build. He closed his laptop. For the first time, he opened up to someone who wasn't family. I wasn't with her in her final moments. Emily, his voice broke, filled with torment. I was in a meeting in Tokyo, a damn merger meeting that I can't even remember now. I thought I had time. I never got to say goodbye. Silence filled the room. Emily sat down, not offering empty platitudes. She just listened silently. Her silence was worth more than 1,000 words. Then, she shared her own story. I wanted to become a doctor, my mother. She died because of a misdiagnosis. A very small mistake by a resident, but it took everything away. I promised her I would become a great doctor, so no one else would have to go through that pain. She paused, her voice faltering. But then I let everyone down. I ruined my own life. They sat there, two souls with different wounds, but sharing the same pain of loss and regret. They were no longer benefactor and beneficiary. They were two people learning to face the past and find forgiveness for themselves. The turning point came on a sunny weekend morning, after almost 2 weeks of knowing each other. Lily ran into the room, holding a colorful but messy drawing. The drawing showed 4 people: a tall man in a suit, a blonde girl in a pink dress, a blonde woman in a blue top, and a baby held in her arms, all holding hands under the sun. Below, the girl had carefully written, "My family." She handed the picture to Emily. Emily looked at the drawing, the naive lines holding a whole world of longing. She looked at the little girl standing in front of her, her eyes clear and full of hope. She started to cry. It wasn't a cry of hurt or helplessness. It was a cry of release, of overwhelming happiness. For the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere. She hugged Lily tightly, and over the girl's shoulder, she saw Ethan standing in the doorway, quietly smiling. A real, unforced smile. The broken pieces seemed to be finding their way back to each other. Happiness had just blossomed like a spring flower, fragile and pure. But the outside world isn't always a garden. Sometimes, it's a storm. Victor Reynolds, Ethan's bitter business rival, sat in his luxurious office, looking out at the city skyline. He was a shark, and he had just smelled blood. A private investigator he hired had sent him a file. Inside were photos of Ethan Walker, his archenemy, frequently visiting a serviced apartment with his daughter. And more notably, a young, beautiful woman and a newborn baby were also present. How interesting, Victor smirked, a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. He didn't believe in fairy tales of kindness. He only believed in weakness. And he had just found Ethan's. Get me all the information you can on her. A few days later, on a crisp morning, Emily decided to take Noah to a nearby park for some fresh air. She felt confident enough to venture out. She wore a simple cream-colored sweater that Ethan had bought her golden hair neatly tied in a bun. For the first time in months, she felt like a normal mother, taking her child for a stroll. She smiled as she watched Noah kick his legs with delight in the stroller. As she passed a street newsstand, a huge, bold headline on the front page of a tabloid caught her eye. It was a gut punch that left her breathless. From medical goddess to millionaire's burden, love or exploitation, Emily's world came crashing down. Her hands trembled, dropping the coins she was about to use to buy the paper. Below the headline were two photos side by side. On one side was a picture of her from 3 years ago, radiant and vibrant in a medical student's white coat, her smile shining. On the other was a candid shot of her holding Noah, looking worn out and exhausted, leaving the luxurious serviced apartment. The article didn't just slander her, it painted a filthy and malicious narrative. It spoke of a gold digger using her sick child to latch onto a lonely, widowed millionaire. It hinted at her shady past and implied that Ethan was a hypocrite, easily blinded by beauty and a sob story. Each word was like a poison needle, pricking at her already fragile self-esteem. "No, it's not like that," she whispered, stepping back and bumping into a passerby. Later that same day, as she was trying to rush Noah home, covering the stroller with a blanket as if she could shield her son from the whole world, a crowd of reporters swarmed her like vultures. Cameras flashed relentlessly, the light blinding her. The questions were aimed at her like daggers. "Miss Parker, what is your real relationship with Mr. Walker? Are you taking advantage of his kindness for a life of luxury? Who is the baby's father? Why did he abandon you?" Emily panicked. She clutched the stroller, trying to find a way out. But then, as one photographer tried to shove a lens directly into a terrified, crying Noah's face, a surge of maternal strength rose within her. Fear turned into indignation. She stopped, holding her head high. Her blue eyes were no longer teary, but filled with a fierce determination. She looked directly at the crowd. "My son is not a story for you to sell." Her voice was sharp and clear, cutting through the noise. She pushed the stroller, parting the stunned crowd, and walked away, strong and resolute. But it was only a facade. When the apartment door closed behind her, she slid to the floor, burying her face in her hands and sobbing. She had been strong for her son, but now she was alone with her pain and humiliation. She knew she couldn't let Ethan be dragged into this. He was a man of status. This scandal could ruin his reputation, affect his company, and even Lily's life. He had given her so much. He had given her a home, given her son a chance at life, and most importantly, restored her faith in people. She couldn't be the reason he lost everything. The budding feelings in her heart told her that sometimes loving someone means knowing when to walk away. That night, she waited for Ethan and Lily to return from a friend's birthday party. She heard their laughter in the hallway, Lily's cheerful chatter. Her heart felt as if it was being squeezed. She wanted to run out, to hug them, to say she didn't want to leave, but she couldn't. When everyone was asleep, she sat down at the table and wrote a short letter, the tears smudging a few of the words. She placed the letter on top of Lily's drawing, the one she cherished the most. "Thank you for everything, Ethan. Thank you for showing me that there is still kindness in the world, but I can't let myself be a burden to you. Please take care of Lily. Goodbye." She kissed the sleeping Noah on his forehead and carefully picked him up. She looked around the room one last time, engraving every detail in her memory. Then she quietly opened the door and left into the rainy night, just like the night she had arrived. The only difference was that tonight she carried not just despair, but a shattered heart. Ethan returned to the living room after putting Lily to sleep. He saw that Emily's room light was still on. He knocked, but there was no answer. A sense of foreboding made him push the door open and step inside. The room was empty, neatly, chillingly empty. On the table, Lily's drawing lay there, with a piece of paper on top. He read the letter, and his heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. He looked around the apartment, the silence, the emptiness. It was more terrifying than the pain he felt when he lost Sarah. He had realized in the past few weeks that this house was no longer an empty shell. It had had laughter, warmth, and life. It had become a home, and now that home was broken once again. Ethan bolted from the apartment like a madman. He was no longer the calm, powerful CEO. He was just a man in a state of panic, terrified that he was about to lose the only light that had flickered in his dark life. He ran down to the lobby, yelling at the night guard, "Did you see a woman and a baby just leave?" The guard shook his head apologetically. Ethan rushed out into the street, the rain lashing his face. He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant. His voice was urgent and strained. "Jason, I need you to mobilize all resources. Find me a woman named Emily Parker and her 6-month-old son. Check all train stations, bus terminals, airports, immediately." He drove aimlessly through the night, his bloodshot eyes frantically searching the faces of people hurrying through the rain, hoping to find a familiar figure. He called Emily over and over, but only the long, hopeless tone of a deadline answered. His heart sank. She had even thrown away the phone he bought her. She was determined to cut all ties. Meanwhile, Emily was sitting on a cold waiting bench at the central train station. It was crowded and noisy, but she felt lonelier than ever. Noah was sleeping soundly in her arms, his small face peaceful, oblivious to the storm raging around him. Emily pulled a thin blanket over her son, trying to protect him from the cold and curious stares. She had bought a train ticket to a strange city, a place where no one knew who she was, a place where she could start over from scratch, once again. But could she? Could she forget Lily's laughter, forget Ethan's warm gaze? Almost 2 hours later, Ethan's phone vibrated. It was an unknown number. He answered, his voice tense. "Hello, Mr. Walker," a familiar voice said. It was the train station security guard whose son Ethan had helped get an internship at his company last year. "I think I just saw the person you're looking for." The rain was still pouring, as if it wanted to wash the whole city clean. Ethan ran through the station, ignoring the puddles splashing his expensive trousers, and then he saw her, huddled in a corner, small and alone amidst the ebb and flow of people. He walked over and stood in front of her. Rainwater streamed down his hair and face. He was soaked, and his breathing was ragged. There was no blame, no anger in his eyes. He just looked at her, his gaze filled with pain and desperation. "Emily, don't go." His voice was hoarse with emotion. "Please, don't go." Emily looked up, stunned. She hadn't expected him to find her. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the raindrops on her cheeks. I can't stay. I will ruin you, your reputation, your company." "Reputation?" Ethan gave a bitter, twisted laugh. "What does it mean when I come home every night to 4 cold walls? What does it mean when my daughter doesn't laugh innocently anymore? Do you know, Emily, before I met you, Lily and I were just existing. We had everything, but we had nothing. You and Noah taught us how to live again. It's us who need you, but I'm just a burden." "No," he cut her off, his voice louder and more determined. "You were never a burden. The real burden is loneliness, regret, living without purpose. You brought purpose back into my life." Just then, the phone in Ethan's jacket pocket rang. He looked at the screen. It was Lily. He put it on speakerphone. The girl's voice was sobbing on the phone, full of panic and fear. "Emily, Dad, is Emily gone? Noah's teddy bear is out of magic. Dad and I don't know what to do. Can Emily come back and help it?" The child's innocent words were a knife to Emily's heart. She bit her lip to hold back her own sobs. At the same moment, Noah in her arms stirred, then coughed violently. The fever had returned, suddenly and fiercely. His skin was burning hot. Without a second's hesitation, Ethan knelt in front of her. He took off his expensive cashmere jacket, which he always took such care of, and wrapped it around Noah. Then he hugged the baby tightly, using his own body heat to warm the little one. He was no longer a CEO. He was just a man trying to protect his family. He looked directly into Emily's eyes. his gaze at once pleading, sincere, and commanding. "Come home, Emily, both of you. Come home with us. We'll face everything together, I promise." That action was a complete display of unconditional love, without a hint of calculation for status or gain. It shattered every barrier, every feeling of inadequacy, every fear in Emily's heart. She looked at him, the man kneeling before her, soaked and trembling, but his arms holding her son were incredibly steady. She watched Noah slowly calm down in his warmth. She couldn't leave. She didn't want to leave. This was home. This was family. She nodded through her tearful rain, a single nod that spoke 1,000 words. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief, as if he had just been saved. He stood up, one arm still holding Noah tight, and with the other, he took Emily's hand, pulling her to her feet. "Let's go," he said, his voice full of certainty. "We're going home." They walked together in the rain, three figures wobbly but inseparable, leaving the cold train station and a past full of pain behind. The future might still hold storms, but now they had each other. The next day, the sky after the rain was a startlingly clear blue. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the press conference room, illuminating Ethan Walker's determined face. He wasn't hiding. He stood before 100 cameras and microphones, not as a CEO trying to manage a crisis, but as a man defending his family. Beside him, Emily sat up straight, a little anxious, but not afraid. Under the table, her hand was clasped tightly in Ethan's. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," Ethan began, his voice calm and firm, echoing through the once noisy room. All sounds immediately ceased. "I know why you're all here today. You want a story, and I'll give you a story, but it's my story." He recounted everything, holding nothing back. He spoke of a rainy night at the hospital, of his little daughter's kindness, of a brave young mother fighting for her son's life. He didn't use flowery words, only raw and sincere truth. "Yes, I helped Miss Parker, and I am proud of it," he said, his eyes looking straight into the cameras. "But the person who deserves thanks isn't me, it's her. She and her son taught my daughter and me the true meaning of family, something money can never buy. Love is not a burden, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege." He paused, squeezing Emily's hand. "And from today, anyone who tries to slander or harm her will be dealing with me and my family. I will use all my legal resources to protect the woman I love." The last sentence was like a bomb that exploded in the room. Cameras flashed continuously, but that wasn't all. "To continue the legacy of my wife, Dr. Sarah Walker, who dedicated her life to healing others, today, I am announcing the establishment of the Sarah Walker Foundation," he declared. "The foundation will specialize in supporting single mothers and children facing medical, housing, and educational difficulties. Because no child should have to pay for an adult's mistakes, and no mother should have to fight alone." The battle wasn't over, but they had chosen to face it head-on. The power of truth and sincerity changed public opinion. Victor Reynolds, once a hunter of stories, suddenly became the vile villain in the public eye. His company's stock plummeted. The following days were busy but meaningful. Ethan and Emily worked together to build the foundation. Emily, with the empathy of someone who had been through it all, became an invaluable consultant. She didn't work in a luxurious office, but went directly to shelters, listening to the stories of other women, counseling them, and connecting them with the foundation's resources. She rediscovered her purpose, turning her pain into strength to help others. One afternoon, as she was working in the small foundation office, organizing the files for a new case, Ethan walked in. He didn't say anything, just placed a small, old velvet box on her desk. Inside was a medical stethoscope, the metal part slightly tarnished with time but still carefully preserved. "It was Sarah's," he said softly. "She used it from her time as a resident until her last day. She always said this stethoscope had heard the heartbeat of hope in the most seemingly hopeless places." He looked directly into Emily's eyes. his gaze full of trust. Sarah would have wanted it to belong to someone with a healing heart, just like her. Emily took the stethoscope, her fingers trembling. She placed it against her heart. She could feel her own strong, steady heartbeat. She was ready to continue the dream she had left unfinished. Time passed. The cold winter gave way to a warm spring. Their lives had entered a new, peaceful, and complete orbit. Lily had her innocent smile back, and she was inseparable from Emily. Noah had grown into a chubby, healthy boy. His babbling laughter the most wonderful music in their home. One April evening, after the two children were fast asleep, Emily sat at the study desk in Ethan's library. This place used to be Sarah's private world, with thousands of medical books. Now it welcomed her. The space was quiet, with only the soft rustle of pages and the gentle spring breeze from the window. She opened a brand new notebook. On the first page, in a steady and hopeful hand, she wrote, "The journey to becoming Dr. Emily Parker. Start date, today." Ethan had come in without her noticing, and he quietly placed a hot cup of chamomile tea beside her. He didn't say a word, just gently placed a hand on her shoulder, a light touch that contained a world of support and love. He leaned down slightly, read the words she had just written, and smiled, a genuine smile, without a trace of awkwardness or sadness. She leaned her head back, resting against him. He gently took her hand. They looked at each other, not needing to say another word. Here, in this simple peace, among the medical books and the steady breathing of the two children in the next room, a true family had been born, not from blood, but from broken pieces, from kindness, and from unconditional love. The most peaceful place had finally begun.